Shalom everyone, welcome to our weekly class Tuesday evenings right here in Rechavia in Yerushalayim for our weekly class in Chassidut. Over the past couple of months we've been learning, since Hanukkah, we've been learning about Purim, and it's never too early. As we see now, we still have quite a few pages left, and Baruch Hashem, by divine providence, this year we have a double Adar, which means we still have another approximately 5 weeks. It's actually exactly 5 weeks because today is Zayin Adar, the 7th of Adar, which is the yard site of Moshe Rabbeinu and his birthday. So it's exactly 5 weeks till Purim, and exactly 3 weeks from tomorrow we're going to have our big Hafnasat Sefer Torah, welcoming of the new Torah, a huge event, and looking forward to seeing everybody at this special event. It's really exciting.
That's tomorrow night.
3 weeks from tomorrow night. 3 weeks. Okay. I'd like to give you a little introduction to today's class because otherwise it'd be a little bit difficult to understand it, as we'll see soon. There are two concepts, two perspectives that one can view the world at and godliness. One perspective is that the simple, self-understood way of understanding is that Hashem is true, godliness is real, and worldly matters are an addition, are a new concept, are not taken for granted. The other perspective is the exact opposite. You look at the world, you touch, you feel, you see all kinds of modern, wonderful technology. That's what us human beings can relate to. So that's called worldly matters are a given, are self-understood. Now you want to tell me about spiritual matters, about holiness and Hashem and the Torah. Okay, I'll accept it, but it's a new concept. It's nice to hear these words in the original Hebrew. Either you have elokut b'pshitut, godliness is simple, is simplistic. In other words, is real. It's granted, and olamot, worldly matters, are behitchadshut, are a new concept, foreign to us, or the opposite. Olamot, worldly matters, are b'pshitut, worldly matters are a given, and elokut is b'tchadshut. Elokut, godliness, is a novelty. Generally speaking, these two perspectives are how the relationship between the Hashem and the godliness in the world is viewed as from Hashem's perspective or from our perspective. If you look at from a neshama perspective, a holy, godly perspective, so you're coming from that world, so what's obvious? Worldly matters. I'm sorry, godliness, because that's where you come from. The neshama comes down to the world. Okay, so now we say, let me find out about what the world is like. Let me see how I can fit myself into the world. But who am I? What do I stand for? What can I relate to? That's godliness. Or the other perspective. You speak to a person down here in this world. We're human beings. We relate to things that we can see, we can touch, different senses. So what's that? Worldly matters. Now you want to tell me that we have to daven to Hashem, and the Kotel is a holy place, the Holy of Holies is right inside the Beit HaMikdash. And then you want to tell me about Yom Kippur, a holy day of the year. It's all nice, all wonderful. I'll learn about it. I'll try to understand it better. But at the end of the day, it's foreign to me because I'm a human being. So these are two perspectives. Obviously, as human beings, we can relate to the second, to the latter, which is olamot b'pshitut, worldly matters are self-understood, and elokut b'hitchadshut, godliness is a novel concept. Occasionally, we have the opportunity to put ourselves in the shoes, in the position of trying to understand, trying to come from a different perspective. It's hard. It's very hard. Because we're human beings, we can't relate to it. You're going to tell me now that all of a sudden Keter, the 10 Sfirot, are all pals, buddies with us, and this physical world, and Google, all that stuff is far. No, I'm sorry. We have to be realistic. Usually, this world, we can't fool ourselves to think that it's the opposite. We have to be realistic. When we understand ourselves, we're able to help ourselves come closer to Hashem. But if we fool ourselves, it'll be difficult. But once in a while, we need to have a taste of the opposite, of what it means. Godliness is a given, and worldly matters are novelty. From the beginning of the Maimer of this Hasidic discourse, we've been learning, in a nutshell, about the idea of Purim, the name. Everything lies in the name. Pur is the root word of Purim. Purim means a lottery, and that's exactly what Haman did. Haman drew a lottery in order to figure out which month and which date he should do the annihilation, God forbid, of the Jewish nation. By divine providence, this month, the month of Adar, this is the month that he was all happy to hear that this is the month when Moshe passed away. And we learned in the beginning that he didn't know that, number one, the passing of a tzaddik is a special day today, Zayin Adar, and also the birthday of a tzaddik is even more of a reason that it should be a special day, because the tzaddik was born, the tzaddik came into the world. Wow, that's amazing. And we learned about the fact that Pur is not just a negative thing, that Haman used that lottery in order to help him carry out the bad decree from Achashverosh on which day that should happen. Rather, Pur represents a very, very high, lofty, spiritual level. Literally in the essence of Hashem, so to speak. Way higher than any name. And that's a connection to Yom Kippur, which is Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. It's Kippur, like Purim. There was also a lottery then. What's the common denominator between the two? We talked about this at great length in the last class. That both Purim and Yom Kippur have the ability, give us the ability to be able to reach high, reach deep, and to touch, to make contact with Hashem Himself. That's why Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, and nevertheless, it's only Kippur. It's only like Purim. Purim is even greater than Yom Kippur. Let's learn page 327, which is the 5th paragraph of the Maimer of this Hasidic discourse, and it reads as follows. If you think we understood everything now the questions continue. V'tzarich lahavin, further clarification is however necessary. The lefi hanal shal yidei hapur hu agoral hu amshachat orein sof ba'al ratzon, according to the above explanation that through the pur, the lot, divine energy was drawn forth from Hashem's infinite light, the level of the master of the will. Do you remember we learned about the difference between the will, the mitzvah, and reaching the Baal Haratzon, the master of the will, which is through us connecting, elevating ourselves to a much higher level, which these special days enable us to do that. A number of occasions in this paragraph, the sentence is rather long. So we'll try to read it a couple lines by couple lines, and then we'll summarize the question. And as a result, atonement was granted for all the undesirable acts committed by the Jewish people. The question arises, according to what we said before, the question arises, what then was the intent of Haman, the wicked, who sought to denounce the Jews above? In Chassidus, it is explained that when Haman denounced the Jews to King Achashverosh, he was in effect speaking to the King of Kings, God. Hashem himself. Lahapir pur hu agoral, in casting the pur, the lot. Haman was aware of the mystic consequences of his conduct. This is the punchline. It's a funny question. Didn't Haman know that through the goral, that through the pur, through the lottery, we're going to reach the highest levels of the Baal HaRatzon, the initiator, the owner, the master of the will? So what are you doing? What are you doing this lottery for? I mean, Haman, excuse me, he was Haman, he was a Rasha, he was a wicked person. What kind of question is that? Didn't he know that Am Yisrael is going to reach much higher than he can ever imagine? So that's why I had to change our thinking for the next little while, that we're coming from a different perspective. The only way you can ask a question, what? Haman? You expect him to have known all this deep Kabbalistic concept about the lotteries and the Baal HaRatzon and higher the name Havaya? The only way you can have this question is only if we come from a human being perspective. That the worldly matters are given, and godliness is a novelty. However, if we put ourselves for cut and paste for a second, or for a few minutes, into a spiritual perspective, where Hashem is a given, godliness is a given, and worldly matters are only a novelty, then we can have a different perspective. What do you think when we learn the Nach, the Navi, the prophets, and when we learn the Torah, the Chamisha Chomshi Torah, you think we're learning just the way we understand it? No, it goes way deeper than our little mind can ever fathom. So therefore, once in a while, we have to climb out of our own little box and put ourselves in the situation of from above. Not, God forbid, to put anybody down, rather simply perspective of how to look at godliness and naturally how we look at worldly matters. Lahapil pur hu agoral, in casting the pur, the lot. Haman was aware of the mystic consequences of his conduct. This is fascinating. Like, he's a real Rasha. If he could know all of the Kabbalistic concepts and still do what he did, oy vavoy, as they say in Hebrew. Oy vavoy. Or they also say, no. Why did he perform an act that drew down such positive divine energies? He's stupid. He's kicking himself in the foot. He himself is doing the lottery, and he knows, right? He knows, because everything is divine, right? It's all a divine world. Just because we don't understand how, it doesn't make a difference. The fact is, we'll learn soon that Achashverosh represents a very high level. Obviously, the way it comes down here is total Russia. But Haman also represents a very high level, because we have the famous metaphor of a wall that falls down. So which part of the wall falls furthest from the source of the wall? The highest, exactly. So just because it comes to so far from the source, the wall throws the top naturally. It throws the top stones as furthest as possible. It could even end up over here. So that's the furthest from the source of the wall. So when we see something far from a human being perspective, it seems oy vavoy, it seems really far. It seems disconnected, God forbid, or detached from its source. But if we think for a second, the source, it itself could be bad. Like Esav, for example. Esav was very far from the source, but his source was very high. Yitzchak saw the source of Esav, and that's why he loved Esav. Not because he was blind or stupid, but it's because he was... You can just push the side button. Sorry. Excellent. And so he was able to reach into the depth of Esav, to the source of Esav. So that's what we're talking about. That's why we expect, we have to work on ourselves, because we're human beings. How can we expect to be truly divine? We're materialistic human beings. Nonetheless, the more Chassidut we learn, and the more we learn chapters like this, in Hasidic discourses like this, we tend to develop more and more an understanding for the other perspective, which we're not used to. So when the wall falls very far, Haman, it seems like he's far, and he is far. I'm not justifying at all what he did. All we're saying is that the source comes from perhaps the highest level. So if Haman knew what he's doing, so he's kicking himself in the foot. He's doing a lottery, which is going to bring Am Yisroel to a salvation which is way higher than Haman can ever reach, and that's his downfall. He's bringing upon himself. He's bringing his own downfall. That's like totally hafuch al hafuch. It's upside. It's crazy. Bottom line is, why would Haman do that? Interesting question, but that's the question. Why would he do that? Why would he hurt himself? As if we always have this discussion in yeshiva when you have the Talmud, and then you have the Rashi and the Tosfot and the Rashba, all the amazing commentaries and the Rosh and the Rif, the Ran. Unbelievable! It's an infinite sea of commentators commentating on the Talmud. So I always wonder if Rashi himself knew. Rashi is a commentator, and there were also commentators on Rashi and on Tosfot, and it keeps on going. So the question is, if Rashi himself knew all of the deep explanations that the other commentators derive from every little word, why Rashi said this and Rashi said that. So it's obvious because Rashi, this is a positive example. Rashi was a big tzaddik, and what he wrote was according to Ruach HaKodesh. This is obviously a much more extreme example where Haman, we want to understand what was going on in his mind, Haman's mind. And it seems to me that he knew all of the deepest intentions. Okay. Second to last paragraph of page 327. We also have to understand, explanation is also necessary. Masha Katuv, what it says in the verse, towards the end of the Megillah on Purim. Al Kein, therefore, Kar'u layamim ha'ela Purim al Shem HaPur. These days were called Purim in commemoration of the lot. So when was the lot? When was that done? In chapter 3. This is in chapter 9, towards the end of the Megillah. There's a little chapter Yud, number 10. But in chapter 9, that's almost pretty much the end of the Megillah. So why was Purim called Purim? Al Shem HaPur, that big hay. You see that big hay? HaPur. Second to last line at the end. That's the. That's like the word in English, the. The Pur, the famous lottery. Which one is that? Back there in chapter 3, remember that lottery? That was Haman's lottery. The Hapur, Behei HaYediyah, the word Hapur, the lot. The Hey in the word indicates a definite article, a specific concept. Kai, it refers to Al Hapur Shenamar Lefnei, on the lot that was discussed, mentioned previously. Hainu, which one is that? Hapur Shepil Haman. That's the lottery cast by Haman. But the lottery that was cast by Haman was obviously something undesirable. Why then are these days called Purim, to recall that lot? Why name a holiday after the tool Haman employed in his attempt to bring about the Jews' annihilation, God forbid? This is really the question we asked in the beginning of the Maimer. But now the question is much stronger. Now that we understand that Haman was so evil that he knew Kabbalah, he knew all of these deepest concepts of lottery and what Am Yisrael can reach through this metaphoric concept of a lottery. So why would we call this Chag the same name as something that Haman knew that he was doing bad? Okay, let's continue. The core of the explanation is middle of page 328. It depends which perspective we're looking at. Just a couple of words of introduction before we start. You can look at the world from, it's very similar to what we said earlier. So that's why the introduction that I said in the beginning is relevant to this too. You can look at anything in the world, including the relationship of Hashem with Am Yisrael, from a perspective of Hishtalshalut, from a chain-like structure of existence, which basically means Chachma, then Bina, then Dat, the 10 Sfirot, the different worlds. It's a whole chain of events until the little guy is created down here in this world. So then you're looking at it from a quote-unquote, I don't want to say natural, but I'm going to say worldly, rational perspective. Okay, makes sense? Even when you look at godliness and Hashem created the world, there's a process. I think it makes sense. But then you have to realize that there's also a much deeper level of relationship between Hashem and the world, which surpasses by far any rationale. That's called higher than Hishtalshalut, than the chain-like structure of existence. And that's what Haman missed. That's where he missed the boat. He, being the evil one that he was, at least down here, maybe he had a high source, but down here he was an awful person, to say the least. So he couldn't appreciate, as we'll say in a second, the super-rational relationship that Am Yisrael has with Hashem. Let's see it inside. The core of the explanation is Shemitzad hadarga d'ishtalshalut. From the standpoint of Seder Hishtalshalut, the chain-like structure of existence, the way Hashem created the world, Kevan shebedarga, so since on this level Hashem established a pattern and the structure for all being, and according to that framework, the actions of the created beings on this lowly plane are significant. If we look from that perspective, the way Hashem created the world, then it's part of that rationale is that if you do good, then you get a reward, and the opposite if you do the opposite. Because it works by order in the court. So then we say that what you do has a big effect. However, if you look from a perspective which is way higher than rationale, the chain-like structure of existence, then you could even be a person who is not a tzaddik. But Hashem doesn't look at the nitty-gritty of the details of the person. So for example, if you look around the street and you see people of all sizes, and you see cars and trees and buildings, one is larger, one is different than the other. But if you're in an airplane and you see little Legos, people running around like ants, and the car, it's all the same. The hotels and the buildings and the shuls and the cars and the people, and it doesn't make a difference how tall or short, skinny or fat a person might be. It all looks the same because you're looking from above. And so that's a whole other perspective, and that's very similar to what we talked about earlier. Let's read the paragraph over here towards the bottom of 328. Our sages state, Hashem looked into the world, into the Torah and created the world. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. And compared the Torah to the blueprints in which a builder constructs the structure. Among the implications of this analogy is that existence was brought into being with a structure and an order. It was planned. A Torah planned, but it was planned. For the Torah's principles and laws define the framework of all being. Now, according to that pattern, Ikar hashpa'a hi Yisroel. God's outpouring of energy is directed primarily to the Jewish people. Why? Because who fulfills Torah mitzvot? Am Yisrael. Lefi sheYisrael hem mekayimim Torah mitzvot. When we learn Torah and observe mitzvahs, we keep the world standing. Because the Jewish people observe the Torah and its mitzvot. Thus, the scales of divine judgment dictate, as it were, that He shower His blessings upon them. 329. Even those who are the opposite of righteous. I like how the Rebbe always uses a clean language. It doesn't say evil. It just says the opposite of righteous. It's the best. Heim meleim mitzvot kirimon. They are filled with mitzvahs as a pomegranate is filled with seeds. Some even say that pomegranate has 613 seeds. But irrelevant, I never counted it, and I'm not sure if every pomegranate has the same amount of seeds. I'm guessing that not, but there's no question that it's filled with seeds. And so the Talmud says that every single Jew is filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. You might look around and say to yourself, how can that be? Some people obviously are not, or don't seem to be, filled with mitzvahs. The answer is, it's not only about what we see on the surface. A person can, every time you say a good word to someone, or you help your parent, you do a mitzvah for their memory, many mitzvahs that you can do that you don't even realize you're doing the mitzvahs. We're just filled with mitzvahs all day. And so it's a positive way of looking at everybody. Even if a person doesn't realize it, we are all filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Hence, they are worthy of divine blessing. Here's the punchline. Even though they transgress His will at times. Let's move on to the next Hebrew paragraph. U'kemoshe katuv, as it says in the verse, Hashkifa mim'on katshecham min hashamayim uvarech et amcha et Yisrael. This can be inferred from the verse, look down from your holy abode, from heaven, and bless your people Israel. Shemitzad b'chinat shamayim, from the standpoint of heaven, shamayim hu shamayim. Our sages state that the word shamayim, heaven, can be divided into two words. It's a short word with 4 letters. Shin mem yud mem safit, final mem. Shamayim. It could be sham mayim, meaning water is there. Such as physical water. Umayim hu chachma. Water refers to wisdom. And more particularly, the wisdom of the Torah, which is Reshit HaIshtalshalut, the beginning of the structure of Seder Ishtalshalut, like we learned Shabbat morning before davening, an amazing mimer in the Torah, where the Alter Rebbe explains the whole concept of Chachma, that Chachma is the beginning of the Ishtalshalut. Chachma is the bridge between the Ein Sof and the 10 levels of the Sfirot, the next 9. So that's the Chachma, which is compared to water. Nishpa'im habrachot liYisrael. The outpouring of divine blessings should be directed to the Jewish people. That's Am Yisroel. The Jewish people are the ones that learn Torah and observe the mitzvot. And so naturally, the main hashpa'ah, the main shefa, the main outpouring of divine blessings should be directed to the Jewish people. Let's learn the next paragraph. It is possible to say that the verse, look down from the heaven and bless your people, Amcha, Israel, implies that from the standpoint of heaven, in other words, remember we began the deduction from the higher perspective, from above, the Torah's wisdom blessings should be granted even to those on a level of your people, even Amcha. in Hebrew also, it's an expression of someone who may not be learned. Amcha, your nation. Just the fact that you are part of Am Yisrael, that already gives you Amcha. Wow, you're Hashem's nation. A term with unfavorable connotations, but I gave it a very favorable connotation because it's your nation of Hashem. For even they are filled with the mitzvot as a pomegranate is filled with seeds, as stated above. The kevan shagam Haman arasha, even Haman the wicked, yada, he knew, sheva'achrei kol hakitrugim shekitreg al Yisroel, that despite all the accusations he would level against the Jewish people, in shum dimyon beino uvein Yisrael, from the standpoint of the Torah's wisdom, there is no comparison between him and the Jewish people. Shalachein, therefore, mitzad hadarga de ishtalshalut, according to the, how do you say that word, please?
Paradigm.
Thank you. According to the paradigm that prevails on the level of seder ishtalshalut, the chain of structure of existence, the chain structure of existence, ein shayach shaman harasha yinatseach chas v'shalom et Yisrael. There is no possibility in the world of Haman the wicked prevailing, heaven forbid, over the Jewish people. Shegam ha'pchusim shebahem mlei mitzvot kerimon. For even the lowly ones among them are filled with mitzvot as a pomegranate is filled with seeds. L'chein hipil puru agoral. Therefore he cast a poor lot. He wished to access a level of godliness above the structures that define Seder Shtalshalus. He knew that if he does anything according to rationale, or according to the chain-like structure of existence, he has no hope. So what did he say to himself? He said, let me try to sneak in to this higher level. Let me see if I can get in there. And then if I do the lottery, then I'll be successful and the favor will be on my side. Therefore he cast a poor lot. We'll do this paragraph again. He wished to access a level of godliness above the structures that define Seder Shtalshalut, the chain-like structure of existence. The kivan shebahad darga delamayla mishtalshalut goral. Since on the level of godliness that transcends Seder Shtalshalut, the level identified with the lottery, as explained in section 3. In spiritual terms, a lottery refers to a rung above the scales of divine wisdom, much higher than divine wisdom, divine will. On that rung, the actions of the created beings on this lowly plane are not significant. All are equal. And darkness is as light, as we said earlier. If you look from an airplane, everything looks on the same level, even though in reality, everyone has his own unique character traits. Nonetheless, basically all of it looks like a bunch of little toys. As explained in the works of our rabbis, there is a level of godliness where if you transgress, how have you affected him? Hashem is so high that if it makes a difference, you do something good, you do something bad. It doesn't make any. He's so high. Hashem's essence is so high. On the lower level of godliness, you do good. Hashem appreciates. One God forbid does bad, he doesn't appreciate it, and then he'll punish a person based on that. But from a higher perspective, he's so high, like we're so nothingness. We're so incomparably distant from Hashem that what we do is like nothing. It's like a guy looking from the airplane, and you think it makes a difference if he stops by a red light, doesn't stop by a red light. They're all a bunch of little Legos, little ants that are crawling around trying to pick up the little grain of earth, of dust. It's nothing. It's nothingness. And so kachashecha ka'ora, darkness is like light, which means that it doesn't make a difference, light or darkness. For Hashem, it's all the same. He saw on a deeper level. Kachashecha ka'ora. That the darkness also lights, also shines. For whom is darkness dark? For someone who is within the parameters of this world. You turn on the light, hey, there's light. Turn off the light, we're in darkness. But if you're totally above it, I don't mean only physically like in an airplane, but your whole existence is totally above the nitty-gritty of what happens in this world, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're so high that the darkness shines.
Well, for sound, darkness is like light. Sound is the same light or dark. Doesn't matter.
That went right over my head. I trust you. I trust you 1,000%. I just have...
We can conceive light and dark. But we hear the same either way.
Yafa. Yafa. What you just said now connects very well to the giving of the Torah, where we say that they were able to hear what is usually seen. They heard the lightning and they saw thunder. And the obvious question is, why didn't it say the opposite? So according to Chassidus, it says that what you see is usually closer. Here is more distant. You can hear something from much a further place than what you can see. And so what does that mean? What can we, based on actually the theme of our shir today, what we can touch, what we can see, we can relate to, that's like seeing. Something far, it's far, we heard about it, it's far. Even if you can't see it, you can still hear it, like you just said. So spirituality for us is distant. From the other perspective, it's exactly the opposite. For Hashem, what's tangible? Tangible is the wrong word, because Hashem doesn't have any bodily functions, chas v'shalom, God forbid. But in concept, what's close to Hashem? Spirituality. What's distant, quote unquote? Materialism. That's like way far from Hashem. So you're saying a very, very powerful point, Chanoch. You're saying that this point, that what we hear doesn't make a difference if it's light or darkness. The objective is, first of all, we can relate to it no matter where it's from, at least from a hearing level. But hopefully, we should be able to make it close. That's the idea of seeing that which is heard, to bring that which is usually far, to bring it close, to be able to see it, to be able to relate to it. Let's read this paragraph on 331. As explained in the works of our rabbis, there is a level of godliness where if you transgress, have you affected him? If your transgressions are multiplied, what have you done against him? Of course, it's not an excuse to do anything bad. It's just trying to emphasize how great, awesome, lofty, remote, exalted, elevated is Hashem. He's way infinite. There's no adjective, there's no description that we can ever use to explain how great Hashem is. Let's continue. If you are righteous, what have you given him? We think you're a big guy? Oh, I gave Hashem, I did a mitzvah for him, now he's all happy. Oh, come on. Are you serious? So we don't do it. Obviously, at some level, Hashem is proud of us, obviously. But come on, between us, it's to really make a difference. To Hashem, I don't want it in any way, shape, or form to be understood from my words that I'm in any way underestimating the accomplishment of the smallest mitzvah. But nonetheless, just to focus on Hashem's greatness, of course we have to do the mitzvah, regardless if it makes a difference to Hashem or not. We do it because He told us to do it. As the famous phrase in Chassidut is, I love this. Even if Hashem would have told us to chop wood, that was the mitzvah. We would do it. Because Hashem said, chop wood. Oh, I think we're doing the tefillin, we light the Shabbos candles, we feel all spiritual, we feel all holy. That's why He gave us the mitzvahs. That's another point, a side point, and even that is almost zero of the real intention of the mitzvah. The real intention is Hashem told you to do it, you do it. Not because I feel good about it, I feel like a machayeh. You do it because you do it because you do it. That's it. End of conversation. So, this is the idea of showing of how, even if we do good things, it's still to Hashem, it really doesn't make a difference. Since Hashem is absolutely transcendent on this rung, does it make a difference to the Holy One, blessed be He, whether one slaughters from the front of the neck or from the nape? His will is there should be from the front, not the back. Nothing man can do can influence it. Hence, on this level, the observance of the mitzvahs by Jewish people does not make them any more worthy of blessing. Lachain, and we're getting into Haman's mind again. Lachain chashav, therefore Haman thought, shemitzad dargat hagoral shalomalam mishtal shalut, yesh makom sheyinatzech chas Hashem Yisroel. Therefore Haman thought that by accessing the rung of a lottery which transcends Seder Shtalshalos, there would be a possibility for him to prevail, heaven forbid, over the Jewish people. But obviously, he has no way of reaching this lottery. Maybe the technical lottery he did, but the real Yom Kippur, the real Pur, the real Hagrala, Goral, he had no connection to. And so, while maybe he had some interesting intentions, but he was daydreaming. Summary. Explanation is required for the fact that Haman cast a lot in an attempt to destroy the Jews. Since a lottery is such a lofty level, why would Haman use it? Why did he perform an act that drew down such positive divine energies? In resolution, from the standpoint of Seder Shtalshalos, the chain-like structure of existence, there is a divinely established pattern and a structure for all being. According to this framework, the actions of the created beings are significant. Hence, Hashem's outpouring of energy will be directed primarily to the Jewish people, because the Jewish people observe the Torah and its mitzvot. Even the sinners among them are filled with virtues. Therefore, according to the paradigm that prevails on the level of Seder Shtalshalos, there was no possibility for Haman to prevail over the Jewish people. Hence, he cast a lot. In other words, he wished to access a level of godliness above the structures that define Seder Shtalshalos. For on the level of godliness that transcends Seder Shtalshalos, the level identified with the lottery, are all equal, and darkness is as light. Therefore, Haman thought that by accessing the rung of a lottery which transcends Seder Shtalshalos, there would be a possibility for him to prevail, heaven forbid, over the Jewish people. And as we said earlier, that was his mistake. He doesn't have any connection. There's no way. It's almost like saying someone wants to achieve something powerful, but he doesn't have the key. He doesn't have the connections. There's no way that he's going to get it. He might know. He might be knowledgeable that there's some treasure there in the treasure box, but if he doesn't have access to it, it's not going to help him at all. It's not going to help him. And so this is why Al Shem HaPur. This was the Pur. Haman knew about this big Pur. He had bad intentions, but this Pur was the same Pur that the name of the Chag is called Purim, which is called Purim because of the lottery which Haman drew. Thank you very much for joining us. Be'ezrat Hashem, next week we should continue, and we look forward to Be'ezrat Hashem. Toda Rabba.